Welcome to the Change Within podcast. My name is Gerard Uselli. We are on episode 6 of the Essential series. And let me tell you, things are getting very interesting here because the amount of essentiality that plays into our society has quite a sense of diversity and a lot of range as far as how people contribute to making our society more essential than it already is. So this person that I have here has been a friend of mine over the years, somebody who works at the Staten Island Advance as a reporter and an editor, my good friend, Mark Stein. Mark, how are you today?
What's going on, man? Hope all is well. Thanks for having me on. I do need to correct you off the bat. I don't know if we want to edit this out or not. Not necessarily an editor, but I don't know. It's very hard to classify what we do these days in these roles. But if this was 10 years ago and I had the responsibility that I have, maybe you would call me an editor, but well, whatever it is, I appreciate
Exactly. It's the beauty of journalism. You just never know how you have to adapt yourself as far as being essential at your job, right?
It's changed so much over the last I've been in it for 14 years now. It's changed in ways that I could have never imagined over the last 14 years, especially in the last 8 9, as social
Right.
media has become another appendage for people beyond the age of 30, if that makes any sense. And now with TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook groups, and everything else in between, it's the impact on journalism is absolutely insane of how it's all going.
100%. And based on that, just seeing like how you've prospered in your career so far, like, did you always know that you wanted to be in journalism?
When I graduated grammar school 20 years ago, we did a sort of farewell on stage of a reimagining of what the class would look like 20 years later or 25 years later. And it was me as an MC / anchor introducing everyone as if I was some sort of reporter or something like that. So to some degree, yes. I honestly wanted to probably focus more on sports, professional sports. And then when I got into it for real, I think I enjoyed more of the impact you could do on a local level or greater than that. That was beyond just sports. It's one thing to break down whether or not the runner on second should have ran home, but a different thing when you're weighing environmental impacts or crime statistics, or I guess in the last 18 months, the coronavirus and how that has raged over the last year and a half or so. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, I always did, but the scope has changed drastically. Sports to everything else that is outside of sports, honestly. So yeah, I definitely did, but the impact, or I guess the categories of what I wanted to cover have drastically changed in that regard.
Do you feel like, in terms of hard news versus sports news, that when you kind of get things acclimated for you to write about and to share with the world, that it could be maybe a little easier because you have research that changes every day, versus in sports, yes, things change as well, but at the same time, there's a sense of it being a little bit more linear because you're kind of like pacing against the story of the actual sports line and everything like that?
Yeah, it's a tricky way to, because sports, when we think of it, if you're just talking game, like the start of the NFL season, well, it's week 1, kicks off this weekend, yada yada yada, and next week 2, and then in a couple months it's week 11, and before you know it, we're looking at conference games before the Super Bowl, and you have that sort of timeline there. But when there's a story that's actually non off the field kind of story that kind of makes everyone's head spin to a degree. I think the coverage is way different, of course, but comparing that to the real life stuff, or not that the real life stuff was the word I'm looking for, but the non-sports sort of, the flooding we had a week and a half ago, something like that comes out of nowhere to a degree, not out of nowhere, but the impact of it was much greater than we ever thought it would be. Vaccine mandates. Monday, I think tomorrow being the 13th, marks a city enforcement period for restaurants and gyms to actually have to check vaccine cards. The ongoing events of that are, I don't want to say more interesting, but probably deserve just a much more focus, of course. Not to say like one is more important than the other sport. So I'm trying to figure out a way to sum this up here, but it keeps things different. I'll say that it keeps things, that risk reward of having a story that could change so many different lives in so many different ways. I think is more important to me, I guess. The connections you make in that regard. I covered flooding 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I still talk to some of those people that heard that. So, and what that stuff has done. So yeah, in that sense, I think you can make a greater difference just covering in a day-to-day format of serious things that people are dealing with. And listen, the sports stuff is great. I always imagine like, hey, what if I did get into sports? What if I was involved in some fashion? But I think there's something special to say that when you've changed someone's, mindset on something, or changed someone's life for the better, or just provided a shred of information that can help someone make a small decision that.
Or what if your news positively impacted your FanDuel betting?
Yes, that too. Yeah, sure. Well, no, it's I'll let you have that one to yourself. But.
What's it now? Something that a little bit more generalized on that, as far as just having people engage with what you do. Like, what does it feel like to have the community engaged with your words?
There's good and bad to everything. I will say to your audience, part of my responsibilities is handling a lot of social media, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, LinkedIn, pulling sites for the story, pulling stories for the website, slf.com, and running a 32,000 person food group where Staten Island Eats and Drinks. And I've probably had the most impact on people there, I guess, which is weird because I used to cover day to day all sorts of things for Staten Island, whether it's parades or fires or whatever. But in that place, I've probably had the most visibility, I guess. There's good and bad to being engaged, though. You get fans and you get enemies to a weird degree. Not saying that there's been many of them, but in a certain role, you have to take certain positions and represent your employer. And by being active in that front, which is something newspapers just weren't able to do 15 years ago, even 10 years ago.
People like to voice their op-eds over your news.
Correct. Yeah, all the time. You have a lot of that. And listen, everyone's entitled to their opinion. It's great. Let it fly. Let it come on. It just gets very tricky these days. It's a different ballgame. So
definitely. And for yourself, as writer's block is inevitable in your profession, do you think experience is kind of like your shielding tool to prevent it?
I don't even know if writer's block is because when I think of writer's block, I think of writing for creative purposes. In our line of work, you got to kind of write to, I don't want to say a format to a degree, but there's an incident, a 4-car crash, 6 people go to the hospital, the numbers sort of speak, or the information speaks to itself. It's the experience, I guess, would say it links to the second nature of writing something like that. A 4-car crash in put a neighborhood in, left 6 people injured, and 4 of them had to be taken to the hospital, according to authorities. And then the incident happened sometime after 4 p.m. at the intersection of blank and blank. Witnesses at the scene said a car ran a red light, caused a crash. Police could not confirm that kind of thing. The experience allows you to write to understand the most important points and what belongs at the top of the story. We call it an inverted pyramid, I guess, where the most important information goes at the top, and then you just go down from there. And in the past, if you had space issues in the newspaper itself, the editor would just chop off the bottom. So whatever you don't need, the least important stuff is at the bottom. Could be another, the third witness's quotes or something like that. The creativity part might come into more of what trying to spice up a lead sentence or a lead paragraph, the lead, as we say, or we write our own headlines now. So the creative part can come into that to a degree. Like, how do I make a flashy headline that is somewhat entertaining but pays respect to the story that I'm writing here? And not everything needs to be serious. It could be, 100th birthday party, or a couple that met in a crappy situation is now getting married, or what a surprise party for someone important in the community, that kind of thing.
Something that I've noticed within working in the DOE and being a substitute teacher and kind of being reflective based versus what I was learning at that point, like 4th, 5th grade, is that the main idea as far as contriving it from what you read still becomes the more difficult aspect as far as like comprehension in itself. So when you're actually absorbing what the main parameters are, I feel like that's a lifelong obstacle that we all go through in our professions.
Yeah, no, there's definitely hurdles to jump with that stuff. A couple of them in this job is like, why did you guys write that? Or well, why did you have to word it like this? Or why are you attributing police to something that this guy did? Obviously on the video he clearly did it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's tricky ways, and the answers to all that stuff, you actually have to attribute it to the police, even if the video did it, because the police are actually charging the loss, would charge someone. It's yeah, even if you know everything in what you do, like there's still more to learn, there's still more to pick up, there's still changes to make, and the community interaction part is more important than ever, because people have questions about things that you do, and they deserve answers on it, and you got to be able to answer them and make sure they understand what you do. Understand that there's a format, there's a structure, there's a proper way to do things, and it gets tricky in every way. Some of it definitely not, but there are moments where you're like, actually, I know you're thinking this, but we had to word it this way because of Y or Z or something like that. I don't know if that answers your question, but it going into it, I going back to the experience thing, it is a job that requires a ton of it, because you make mistakes. They just happen. There's no job you can go through without making mistakes, but fortunately you have people on your side, that editors and colleagues and whatnot, that might notice something and be like, you might not want to write it this way. You might want to change that sentence, omit that word because that word might sound a little harsh, replace it with this word. And maybe you could just quote someone here instead of paraphrasing quote. Just make it more simpler for yourself, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I hope that answers your question.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. And something to kind of expand on that, especially with things amid the pandemic, like how do you think journalism has changed in your role?
It's complicated answer there. During the pandemic, at least the beginning of it, March, April, people, there probably wasn't a period in the world where people were reading more news. You know what I mean? Everyone's home, everyone's glued to their devices, their computers, TVs, reading, absorbing, you name the channel, you name the website. I think that was a good thing, but at the same time, you have a lot of skeptics out there where with coronavirus and COVID, and certain people get their information from different places. I guess it's a good, in a weird way, I'll go back to it by saying it's good for the news business that everyone's looking, but it has been complicated. The last few years have spawned a lot of distrust for news, and listen, some of it is warranted in certain spots. I don't want to get into specifics, but sometimes you could look at things, I don't know why this is the way it is, but sadly it is. Probably a different discussion for another day that might be better off camera.
Of course.
But there's a lot of complicated stuff in that, as in, like, there's different news sites that have different slants and different political points of views, and that bleeds into the TVs as well, with your different TV channels as well, with different channels having different philosophies on how to report things or what to report on things. And that's not to say that every single news site is biased and shouldn't be trusted, but there's a lot of skepticism out there from a lot of different people that read it and watch it. but I do think more people are watching than ever before. And unfortunately, there is a rift through people regarding coronavirus and its significance and its impact and how bad it could be and vaccines and all that stuff. But this has been a moment for newsrooms because I will add during the start of the pandemic, we had a lot of businesses shut down or a lot of people just not spending money and a lot of people that lost their jobs, which means those companies that either laid off people or didn't have any work going on weren't able to provide ad dollars. So the news business changed a lot in that early sense. This is no secret. My employer sold their building or is in the process of selling their building in Grasmere, and we've been working from home for 18 months. I know other newsrooms across the country have sold their offices and printing presses or printing press facilities because you were able to do the job from home. Coronavirus has kicked us into a different area where we don't need to be in an office. We could get everything done from elsewhere.
How does it make you feel?
Working from home for 18 months? It's good and bad again. Like everything. The great part is, listen, I'm home. Like if this was work right now, I would just be hanging out the way I am, as is, and churning out content and whatnot. I miss my colleagues. I miss the day-to-day BS that goes on. We were in an open office setting, which was different than the newsroom I grew up in, where there's a lot of cubicles and whatnot. And if you yelled something out or made a joke that was really loud, it might be frowned upon a little bit more than an open office setting. I miss a lot of that stuff. I miss being able to walk over to someone and just get an answer or ask a question, or I can provide an answer to someone that walks over to me, as opposed to sending an email and hoping to get back to it in the next 10 minutes that they're not taking care of their kids or making breakfast for their husband or wife or whatever the case. When you're working at home, you have other things to deal with when you're not in an office. But the good thing about working from home is, there's a little more flexibility. It feels you're in your ultimate comfort zone, but you miss your colleagues.
I think the generality as far as the aspect of having a New York minute, not to say that the minute has been expanded on as far as a sense of time frame, but to interpret it itself as far as like, okay, when are you going to hear back from somebody? It's kind of like a different set of standards as far as like, okay, how many minutes kind of pass by?
Yeah, it totally is. I have one of my colleagues, I'll shout her out, Kristen. She had her second child, I think, right before the pandemic started. So like, hey, you're now working from home. You have a very young, very, very, very young daughter, another young daughter. And all right, have fun. We need you to do all your work, though. Make sure you do everything you have to do. And oh, by the way, your oldest child is also being home, is learning, is being schooled from home too. So good luck with all this. Hope you meet your expectations for us. And of course she has, because she's amazing. But that's a lot of work that I can't imagine, for some people that are working at home still. Like, how the hell is this still going on? I obviously it's created a different world for companies and a different level of standards for employees that may have loved working from home for the last 18 months that may have not returned yet. I'd imagine, as everything else with coronavirus, it'll impact things going forward. Hey, you want to work from home 3 days a week? Great. I mean, just think of the time you save on commuting and tolls and gas.
There is a mantra in New York about that, and it has opened the horizons for, in a weird way, employer marketing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So totally, another game changer that's come from this. So just wild things from there. But I look forward to going back to the office, but at the same time, I'm in no rush. I'll leave it at that.
I get that.
I've been able to get more done at home to a degree because I don't feel guilty putting on the laptop or checking in at 10:30 at night for something that I could maybe get a head start on the next day or whatever the case. And listen, I'm running that food group. It's not like it goes quiet at 6:30 at night. You got to check in there at 11:30. All right, yeah, you just flip the sign around. It says closed like a diner. No, no,
Oh my god, that
doesn't
would
work
be
that way.
something for social media. Like
It
if you
would
just
be.
shut it all down for like 7 hours or so and be
Yep.
like, okay, you come back on 3 in the morning.
See you at 7. Yeah, it closes at midnight or something like that. If I was to close it at 7 o'clock at night, I think people would kill me because it's like prime dinner. But yeah. So working from home for me, like let's keep it going. But if you send me back, you send me back. It is what it is. But it's definitely changed things. It's definitely changed a lot of things. I'm sure you've seen some of it. With the DOE, probably not. I don't know how much you've experienced in the DOE end of life working from home, but I'm sure you have plenty of people that you know and have chatted with on here that have drastically been impacted by that.
Absolutely on that. So something that I want to ask as well, kind of to flip the scale for you a little bit. As a
Sure.
viewer yourself, how do you interpret news when you're not working for news?
It's I, I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this. I saw several years ago during a really controversial story on Staten Island. I'll say the Eric Gardner story. I saw a lot of reporting on it, and it was the first time I experienced something where people were reporting things from websites that I didn't know about with little to no attribution and little to no, like if a news outlet covers another story from another news outlet, they credit that outlet for putting that information out there, and they source the information as best as they can. This outlet or these random outlets I was seeing were not doing anything like that. They were only writing from the story what they wanted to write, as opposed to summing up. Like if the story had 1, 2, and 3 bullet points, they were just focusing on the second bullet point, ignoring the other 1 and 2, 1 and 3 that provided more context to a situation. So when I watch and look at news now, I try to find as much attribution as I can. Um, I try to just think more inside of how they got this story. Why are they even writing this? What kind of slant does this place have? Does the headline match the goods? You know, sometimes you see headlines and then you click the story and it's like, this isn't that juicy at all. Or this headline doesn't reflect what's in the story. Why did they write this? I see a lot of, quotes in stories that could, just a couple of words could be quoted in the story to try and get a little reaction out of somebody. There seems to be a lot of garbage. I'll leave it at that. A lot of garbage news out there. Things being written just to get attention. Things being written that might not have as much substance, that may lack context. I see a lot of that junk. I probably read more stuff than I ever have before. I even look at some of the gossip crap in entertainment because I get alerts from this news app I have. And some of it pops up on there, and it's all crap. There's just so much junk out there that it's not even funny. But there's great stuff too, and seeing a lot of the junk allows me to appreciate a lot of the great stuff out there, like that could be coming from the Wall Street Journal or the Times or the Financial Times, or you
It
know,
does, it does kind of like give you the sense of perspective as far as like what you're attracted to in terms of what you're like reading yourself, and seeing like how you're able to divvy up fact versus opinion based on
mhm.
how the writer's history is. You're able to research more where that writer has come from in
Yep,
his or her career.
that too. No, you can see a lot of that stuff as well. Like, what else has this person written? What else is this outlet written? I mean, I've never. Right now, it's football season. We're starting week 1 today, as I mentioned before, and you're going to see a lot of stuff about injuries and this and that, and trends in wide receivers and running backs and all that other stuff. And there's so many new websites out there now regarding that. So how am I supposed to take some of this stuff with credibility versus this stuff with credibility? So there's a lot out there, as you see. I mean, in the podcast world as well. There's a
Absolutely.
lot of stuff out there. It's insane what the internet's done, for good and bad. As I keep saying, this whole like this gray area here of positives and negatives. Listen to it. We all have an opportunity to share a message and do the right thing, but some people don't do the right thing. I don't know. What
Well,
I think you're doing though is awesome though. You enjoying the stuff you're doing? This is pretty sweet.
so I'll just say this much: it's kind of a change in society. If I can do this, anyone else can do it.
Don't say that
No, I'm
because I
kidding.
know people that have tried doing this and can't do it. So
There
I
we
do know
go.
people that have tried. So I think you do. I like the illustration you have here. The
Yeah, I
colorful.
feel like I feel like what's important and essential to having this as a constant sense of branding is knowing that everyone's brain is different and how it functions like in its own right. So it
Hmm.
goes to show that when two people talk to each other, you're going to get both sides of the spectrum based on like
Yep.
who you talk to. So then you're able to evaluate as far as just the extent of your conversation, how you connect with that person, and seeing just through the parameters of your social media on that itself, like how you're able to change with that person going through the journey together.
Oh, no question. Yeah, I've seen it. Listen, I've had arguments with people on social media and great conversations with people on social media over the years, and there's a lot of disagreements. It is funny though when a lot. My favorite part is when people who disagree on like 99% of the time find that one little thing where they connect on, and it's almost like magic's in the air, like
Yeah,
fireworks are
crazy.
shooting off kind of thing. So there is something to be said that yeah, there's the viewpoints totally different. Right now, everyone has different. But when you do get people to come together on something, it's a pretty sweet thing. So
I cannot agree more on that. And my final question for you is how
yeah,
can we make the news more essential than it already is?
more essentials a tricky is might not be the word I'd use, but I would say if you appreciate news in any sense, if there's an outlet out there that you like to read, if you've been hesitant of an outlet because of subscription, just sign up for something. I guess the one way you make it more essential is by not supporting any news organizations and watching the standard continue to dip in some cases. Not to say that it's dipping everywhere, but in some cases, there's it'd be irresponsible for me to sit here and say that news could be better or could be worse, that kind of thing. Over the years, people have just stopped paying for things. You can't give things away for free online forever. My employer, along with dozens, hundreds of news outlets, has given away news for free online for 15 years. And last year, we planned on doing it despite coronavirus. Coronavirus was the little thing that sort of crept inside and changed the plans. We were going to do it anyway. We implemented a subscription package online, and we have to do that stuff because the world has changed. 25 years ago, a newspaper in, say, the market of Staten Island would sort of dominate the ad revenue climate, but now it's become, and technology didn't allow people to really get information in other ways. It's not like you had ABC 7 or CBS 2 coming here with a big Staten Island, impact, Staten Island presence. We were a major contributor there, but the advent of Craigslist and Google and Yelp and all these other outlets, online, social media, and whatnot, Facebook Marketplace, it shrinks that ad revenue area for a place like us. And giving the news away for free online wasn't going to work either. So, back to the essential thing by seeing parts of your company sort of slip away to a degree, and the whole industry is facing this. Copy editors being replaced, photographers disappearing, being replaced with just reporters that are juggling things with cell phones now too. Not to say the cell phones don't take good photos, but it's different. All of that sort of matters in the grand scheme of things. You chip away, you chip away, you chip away. It's just natural the quality will slip a little bit. Not to say that my newspaper's quality is slip. I think we're doing a damn good job, but these are things that you consider as you're moving along here, and the climate changes. So to make news more essential would sort of be I guess, the one way I'm answering the question is if the ad dollars, if the revenue continues to plummet, and you realize who's keeping an eye on things around here, it does become more essential. But My only hope is that people would support not just us or any the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal. I mentioned the Financial Times. There's so many out there that are good for areas, good for communities, whether it's covering the Little League action or what is going on with this natural area here that could be paved over for something else, or politics, or crime rates, or what the bakery down the street is selling that's different than anyone else in this entire city. All that stuff matters for a community, for well-being, a place to get a message out. People come to us all the time. Hey, I have a crazy story that you might want to check out. Please look into it if you can. And sometimes
I'm gonna leave it on a note with this too, because you're saying some very interesting things, and this is just something that came to my mind. So
yeah,
as technology has advanced throughout our society and just throughout the sense of having so much access to a sense of learning, knowledge, even accountability, I feel like being a consumer nowadays with everything that you have in your privilege becomes more of an opportunity to be a prosumer in yourself. When you're a prosumer and having more of that capability in working those technological aspects, whether it's your profession or another, the issue is you start to kind of compromise who your customer is. And I think the best way to pivot from that is how you can find partners over your customers.
Yeah, no, I won't disagree with you there. There's been a lot of what this is the technology's been, it's again mixed bag kind of thing. Anyone right now can start up. You're doing great with your podcast. I know a lot of people have just started up websites for information purposes to show off their illustrations. In your case, doing great interviews. It's allowed a lot of people to do great things and learn their way through all this stuff. Shit, in our business, we've learned our way through a lot of the things with social media. It was almost the flip side of that, where you had a consumer base, and then, oh hey, let's try and step our way into here and be impactful in this sense, as we've seen other businesses do it as well, whether it's bowling alleys and newspapers and coffee shops, that kind of thing. It gets tricky. Everything feels so complicated these days with the rise of technology, but it allows people to grow. It allows businesses to grow. Sadly, it allows businesses to shrink too, or forces them to shrink to some degree. But there's great opportunity there. I guess I could leave it at that.
There we go.
I'll leave it at that. There's great opportunity to come. You hopefully make the best of it. And folks, if you're out there, if you're trying to do something like that in the space you aren't familiar with, I wish you luck. Obviously, there's ups and challenges and great possibilities for you, but it is a learning experience. We're all doing this.
Well, I'll just say this much as far as the essentiality of bringing news to one another and how we kind of have the perspectives as far as me doing things in a more one-to-one setting versus you towards a whole demographic of people who interpret your news. It's kind of like our just responsibility as far as how people are entertained by it and how they can learn from it. Nonetheless, that does conclude the 6th episode for the Essential series of the Change of Him podcast. For those who want to check us out but have never had the chance to yet, please do so at Anchor, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mark, thank you very much for joining me today, and have a great rest of your day.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.